Okay, this is off the cuff again, and I want to talk about the former KGB agent and social engineer, um, Yuri Bezmenov, and he defected from Russia to the United States in 1984 as a social engineer that worked for Russia to warn the United States of what has been happening and what is coming. Now, before I describe to you uh, what he laid out and what he essentially helped to plan and engineer, is that once a people has fully been falsely indoctrinated, that you will tell them the truth, they will know the truth, and they're not going to care. They will continue in the same lifestyle that they had always continued in. And then not only that, they will fight anybody who tries to tell them the truth because they're already dragged up into the net. And I want to tell you that from his perspective, that from where he was, it was close to the last generation before the United States would be completely taken over by communism. Okay, and so basically, he said that the first stage to overtaking an entire nation is, first of all, you've got agents that are put in every place that is possible in the nation that you're trying to conquer. It doesn't need to be very many in each one of these places, but suffice it to say that it would be in a large metropolitan city or in a city of tremendous influence in the rest of to the rest of to the rest of the nation. Um, and um, and they may have orbital cities where they may go where they may only need one, to make a compelling case. Um, and um, and so as they win over people, as they win over their minds, they can begin to falsely indoctrinate. Now, this Russian engineering started in the 1920s, and they had planned eventually over time to overtake the United States with the doctrine. At which point in time, once the people have been won over to the doctrine, all they have to do is point in a direction and they'll go there. That's basically it. So what he basically said was, you need to um, plant folks that will operate in a foreign doctrine within, say if you want a liberal doctrine, then you plant one or two people. They become good friends with the rest of the community. They make investments in money. They might own businesses, but they have a liberal point of view. Okay, and they act and operate in a liberal point of view, and they use the United States laws to do so. Then, as time goes on, little by little, they begin to win people over to their side, and these people have no idea what's going on. Basically, what's happening is by friendship, through money, and through rubbing elbows with their fellow man, basically, they are convincing them of some other doctrine that is not native to the nation that they are in. And then pretty soon, they have begun to convince them that, oh, this is the way to go. All right. It's worked for me. It's worked for him. It's worked for these people across town. And look at how well they're doing. Okay. So once they start to get people to come around to their side, okay, it gets steeper. Now they start messing with the moral fabric. So, okay, so maybe, say for instance, the moral fabric might be Christianity or Catholicism, or maybe it's just conservatism, or something to that effect. Okay. Well, as we know, Christians, Catholics, no matter how much I don't like Catholics, but Christians, Catholics, Baptists, all have morals that are deeply set in the Bible. And so basically what you do is, okay, you've got these friends now who are adults who have children. All right. So that was phase one, winning over the adults, winning over the parents and the teachers. Phase two now is getting a hold of the next generation, their children. Okay, then you start messing around with their morals. Okay, you start suggesting things. Okay, now it took longer in the United States than it would in another nation, but it took longer here. And by the 50s and 60s, it became a Hollywood impression that divorce was okay. And of course, the first Hollywood divorce on TV was Lucille Ball. And then people began to start accepting the idea of rejecting a lifelong relationship with a spouse for some, they magnify some small behaviors in their spouses, and then they start, and then they start complaining about them. Then there's unease in the household, and the next thing you know, they're fighting about other issues because one may be a staunch conservative and the other one has been switched over to liberalism, and so on and so forth. And so the next generation of children was actually influenced by Hollywood movies, TV. Okay, and so that was just a minor part of the plan to mess up the morals. Marriage is not necessarily a lifelong institution, and you don't have to live with the same spouse lifelong. And if there are problems, you fix it. But they were maintaining with an agenda that you don't like certain things about your spouse, he won't stop doing them, or vice versa. Maybe the husband didn't like what the wife was doing and she wouldn't stop doing them, but they were still faithful to one another. They just had these quote unquote character flaws. Okay. And the character flaws were magnified. So you got the acceptance of divorce. All right. So here was the agenda. Okay. So now here we are in the 70s and the 80s. Divorce was well accepted. So pretty much now you could trade in your old spouse for another one. And the old spouse would, then take over or assume duties of the household as either the husband or the wife. And would assume parenting the children, with, of course, the divorcee having visitation rights, or maybe not, or maybe the step parent, adopted the kids, and there was no need to have the other spouse. But along with that came with feminism, and so basically the male now was being pushed out of the workplace. He was being harangued and harassed and sued and falsely accused of things, and so on and so forth. And one out of a handful of men out of many were magnified as if their behavior was completely normal for males. Adulterers, drunkards, men who went to strip clubs and took women to motel rooms and stuff like, and did things and opened up credit card accounts in secret only for their wives to get the credit card bills, and so on and so forth. They made it look like this was normal behavior for a married male. So now it became war against males, and there was tremendous encouragement for divorce for the purposes of the woman not necessarily getting remarried, but for the purposes of her working and possibly supporting those children on her own and collecting welfare benefits, which we all know is a form of socialism or communism. And socialism is for this socialist portion of it, which really isn't socialist. It is actually paid for by the taxpayer, out of taxpayer money, from those who are currently working and paying taxes out of their paychecks every week, 2 weeks, month, however much it would be. Okay, now that we've got women out there divorced, they're working, and they've got their kids in daycare, which, by the way, is probably being paid by welfare benefits, or some poor guy's alimony, which he probably didn't need to be paying in the first place. He could still be the husband. There was nothing wrong with him. It's just all of his flaws were magnified to the point where, what shouldn't actually be bugging the spouse does. And it just gnawed on their nerves because it was just repeated over and over and over again on the radio, on the TV, and so on and so forth. So now the kids are on welfare. They're being taken care of by somebody other than their parents. So here's another part of the agenda: overtake the minds of the children, young children, through daycare and through public education. All right? And this is where the next agenda came from, to install liberal teachers, socialist teachers, to teach a radically different doctrine to your children. And this started actually in the mid-70s, and it continued on through to what we see today. So what we have now is we have children who have been falsely indoctrinated, and then they took that false indoctrination, and then they went and they got married and probably divorced and got on welfare with food stamps and had kids, and sent their kids to the same public schools. Now there is another false doctrine out there in the form of teaching children a false reality that's saying, oh, okay, homosexual relationships are fine. It's okay to be homosexual. It's okay to show that in public between two males and between two females. At one time, triads were even accepted on public display, public affection. Okay, that generation was completely screwed up. They grew up, they had wives, or maybe they didn't get married. Maybe they just went straight for pregnancy and had kids and went straight to welfare. All right. Now we had more radical teachers that were put in place, and those kids now are being taught that it's okay for a boy to become a girl and call themselves transgender. Okay? That is where we are at right now. Okay? And that is just pure Satanism. If you take a look at the statue, if you take a look at the satanic statue, and you see, and you take a look at it, it is of both sexes, and it is attracting children to it. Okay, that right there, that is a depiction of Satan. Okay, he wants children to believe that men can be women and women can be men. And so you can see what kind of confusion and what kind of disaster this could cause in your children today. Now, this is going to sound like I'm prejudiced. This is going to sound like I'm discriminatory. But when you recognize what's going on around you and you see what's going on around you, and there's really nothing you can do about it because everybody's blind. Everybody thinks that nothing is wrong. They can't see it or they don't want to see it. And so if you try to magnify the problem and bring it to the forefront for what it is, then you are going to be accused of some things that aren't too cool. Which is why I have been refraining to say something about it. Now this Yuri Bezmenov, it's a Russian name, I'm sorry, Bezmenov, he already told us in 1984 what stage we were in. We were in a stage in which conservative classroom teachers were being traded for liberal teachers in the classroom in our public schools, and then later they were exchanged almost entirely in our colleges. So now that we've got this flaming liberalism going around, and by the way, it was Russian engineered. Now, like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm prejudiced and discriminatory, but in my observation, you need to understand this. In my observation, guess who is taking advantage of this Russian social engineering? African Americans.